I've been hunting since I was 12. My dad taught me. He said the woods were honest. Animals were honest. Weather was honest. You either respected it or it killed you. I believed him. I loved the quiet. I loved the way sound fell away when the trees closed around me. I loved the breath I could take only out there, the one that felt clean. I kept hunting after he died. I hunted alone, and then with friends. It made sense. It had rules. I don't hunt there anymore. I won't go back to Hollow Creek Woods. Not after what we saw. Not after what followed us home. It was me, Caleb, and Rick. We grew up in the same little town. We were those kids who never left each other. We fished in summer, skated the creek in winter. We learned to drink from the same busted cooler in Caleb's uncle's barn. We got older and got worse jobs. We kept the woods. It felt like the only thing that didn't change. That morning was bright and cold. The kind of cold that scrapes your teeth when you breathe. Thin ice lay over the puddles at the edge of the dirt lot where we parked. The sky was pale and empty. The trees stood tight and black as if they had been burned. You could hear every step. Snow from 2 nights ago had crusted into a skin. It cracked when you put weight on it. I remember the sound got under my skin. It sounded like someone chewing. Caleb had the big pack and the good thermos. He was taller than me, broad, with a beard that always looked like it was growing back even when he had just shaved. Rick was wiry. He grinned a lot even when the grin didn't match the moment. He carried his rifle loose, like it didn't matter, but his hands were quick when it was time to raise it. "Deer'll be slow," Caleb said. He puffed on his hands and stamped his boots. "We'll push them toward the ravine." "Same path." Rick nodded and then grinned at me. "You still afraid of the creek?" "I'm afraid of you falling through and me having to drag your ass out," I said. "Romantic," he said, and shouldered his rifle. We went in. The light changed once the trees closed over us. It's always like that. Even when the day is bright, the woods hold their own dim. It isn't dark, but it is close. You walk softer in it without meaning to. We followed the old deer trail that cuts in from the lot and then bends south toward the ravine. The snow was shallow there. You could see patches of brown leaves, dead ferns, and dark roots. Every now and then we stopped and listened. Far off, the highway hissed like wind. Closer, there was nothing. We split, like we always did. Caleb took the higher trail. Rick drifted left where the cedar thickens. I went down toward the ravine. It's not deep, but it's steep. Water runs at the bottom when the thaw starts. That day it was a black line under thin ice. It clicked when it moved. I walked slow and watched for sign. There were tracks. Fresh. 2 prints. Then 3. One set was small, a yearling. There was hair snagged on a low branch. I took a breath and felt the old quiet settle in me. The good quiet. The reason I go. Then the birds stopped. I didn't notice at first. I only noticed when I realized I was listening harder than I should have had to. I realized I was waiting for a noise to come back that should have been there. Wind in the branches. A crow. A squirrel digging under snow. There was nothing. I heard my breath. I heard the small crack of ice under the water. That was it. I crouched by the ravine to look at the tracks again. Something was wrong with them. They were deep. Too deep. Like something heavier than a deer had stepped in the same place. The edges were scuffed. There were prints that were not prints. They were smudges that had shape if you stared at them too long. I stood and looked up. The trail ahead bent through birch trunks and dipped behind a fallen maple. It should have felt ordinary. It didn't. My hands were too tight on the rifle. I made myself loosen them. I moved again and kept low. I checked for Caleb and Rick. We have a whistle we use to signal. One short. Then two. Then another short. It carries well. I didn't whistle. I didn't want to hear it echo wrong in that air. I found him near the bend behind the maple. He looked like a pile of clothes at first. Dark jacket, dark pants. Face down. I saw the boot and thought it was an old hunter who'd fallen and passed out. I thought it was a drum. I thought a lot of things fast and wrong because I didn't want to think the right thing. I went closer. My teeth clicked and I told myself it was the cold. The jacket was torn across the back. The fabric had stiff dark patches. The snow around the body was stained, but the cold had turned the stains brown-black. There were scratches in the ice. Long, shallow scratches like something had been dragged and then stopped. I told myself to call out. I told myself to check for a pulse. I told myself to do anything that meant I was some kind of good. I didn't move. I don't know how long I stood there. I smelled metal. I smelled something sweet under it, like old fruit. I heard voices. Two men. Close. Speaking low but not careful enough. They were on the other side of the maple. I dropped behind the trunk and pressed low. My breath turned into a white cloud I tried to swallow. Told you to bury him deeper, one said. His voice was rough, like he had smoked all his life or had screamed recently. It's frozen, the other said, sharp, fast. Ground's like stone. We didn't bring a pick. We'll come back. We can't come back. We shouldn't be here now. Shut up. The second voice snapped hard. Check the head. Make sure. My stomach went hot and then cold. My fingers tingled. I held the rifle and thought about the safety. I thought about whether I had clicked it off at some point without knowing. I thought about the way the cold makes the trigger feel like glass. They stepped into view. I saw their legs first. Work boots. One pair stained dark. Jeans stiff with damp. One wore a coat with a reflective stripe across the bottom, the kind road workers wear. The other wore a dark parka and a knit cap pulled low. I couldn't see their faces. I could see their hands. Black gloves. Thick. The one in the parka carried a shovel. The metal edge was scratched bright. The other held a bundle in plastic, like garbage bags wrapped around something not square. It sagged in the middle. The way it sagged made me want to close my eyes. They stopped at the body. The one with the shovel crouched and touched the back of the man's head through the glove. He moved hair. He made a low sound. Not sorry. Just sure. He stood again and nudged the shoulder with his boot. The body shifted. The sound it made was small and heavy. We need to go, the one with the bundle said. He turned his head. Even with the cap and the band of his scarf I saw his chin. There was a scar there, white and straight. He looked up, past me, at the line of trees. He didn't look at me. Not then. We come back tonight, the shovel man said. Lights. Pick. Quick, quick, the other echoed, and then he sniffed. He turned his head again, not at me, but close. He lifted his chin like he smelled something that bothered him. I did not breathe. He looked around once more. His eyes skimmed the trunk I was behind. Then he moved. They both did. They went the way they had come, their steps slow and steady, as if they were sure nothing in the world could touch them here. When their footsteps faded, the woods didn't fill with sound again. The silence sat like water in my ears. I didn't move for a long time. I kept waiting to hear Caleb call, or Rick crack a joke and scare the fear out of me. I waited until my legs hurt and my fingers went numb. Then I stood. I looked at the body and turned away fast. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to know if it was someone from town. I didn't want to know anything. I should have gone back to the lot. I should have called the police. I should have done anything except what I did, which was try to find my friends first. It felt important that I tell them myself. It felt important that we were together. I whistled. The sound went out and fell flat. I waited. I whistled again. A reply came, but it was wrong. It was the right pattern, but off. The timing wasn't ours. It was like someone who had heard us once tried to copy it. I didn't answer. I moved, low and careful, circling back toward where Rick had gone. His tracks were clear where the cedars opened. He walked with a light step that set his prints at an angle. I followed them. I found a spent shell near a rotten stump. He had taken a shot at something. I found a smear of hair on a bramble. Deer hair. I found a broken branch and then a clean space where snow had been kicked up. Rick? I said, small, not a shout. I'm here, he said, behind me, too close. I turned fast and my finger slipped on the trigger and I almost fired into the dirt. Jesus, I said. Don't do that. He looked at me. His grin was gone. His mouth was a straight line. His eyes were glassy and too big. They saw me, he said. My throat went tight. Who? He didn't answer right away. He swallowed. He looked past me toward the ravine. 2 guys, he said. Work coat. Dark parka. I think I saw a scar. I knew then he had been close enough to see faces when they had walked past me. He had been watching from the other side. He had been alone. He had not called out because he was as pinned as I had been. We need Caleb, I said. I don't see him, Rick said. He looked around like the trees would move aside and show him our friend if he stared hard enough. I heard the whistle. It was wrong. I heard it too, I said. We started back toward the high trail. We moved slow and tried not to make noise. Every sound we made felt like a flare. I kept seeing the body in my head. I kept seeing the scar under the knit cap. I kept thinking about the bundle that sagged. Why would they come back? Rick asked, his voice a thin whisper. They said night. With lights. To dig, I said. He breathed out, long. A white snake in the air. You heard them. I was 5 feet from their boots, I said. We climbed. The snow here was deeper. It sucked at our boots. My calf muscles stung and went dull and then stung again. The trees thinned. That should have been a good sign. More light. Easier sight lines. It only made me feel like something could see us from farther away. We found a hat first. Caleb's knit hat. Dark green with a hole near the rim from a hook in the garage that always caught it. It lay in the snow by a rock. I picked it up and brushed it off. It was warm on the inside. That scared me more than anything else had so far. It meant we had only just missed him. Or someone else had just missed us. I put the hat in my pocket. We moved on. There were tracks, but they were messy. 2 sets at least. Maybe 3. The snow was trampled. A branch had been broken. The bark was scuffed where it had been twisted and not snapped clean. There was something dark on the trunk at shoulder height. Blood. I touched it and it was tacky. I wiped my finger on my coat and wished I hadn't touched it. The way it stretched before it let go made my stomach turn. We found Caleb sitting on a log 10 yards up the trail. His back was against a birch. His head was tipped forward. His rifle lay in the snow with the strap digging a thin line into the drift. For a second I thought he was sleeping. People look that way sometimes when they're too cold. They curled toward themselves and tucked their chin. Caleb, I said. He lifted his head. His eyes were open. There was a shallow cut on his cheekbone and a deeper one on his ear, like something had grazed him. Blood had run down his neck and darkened the wool of his collar. He blinked at me like I was far away. "Where'd you go?" he asked. His voice sounded normal. It shook a little, but I've heard him shake after we pulled in a fish and he laughed too hard. "You're bleeding," I said. He touched his ear and winced, and then he looked at his hand. "Ha," he said. He looked at the ground. "I heard you," he said. "I think. I heard our whistle. But it wasn't you." "We heard it too," Rick said. "Two men," Caleb said, and looked up the trail. His eyes were clearer now. He looked angry. Not in a hot way. In a cold way that means he is thinking. "They were following," he said. "They're slow because they don't know the trails." "We need to leave," I said. My voice came out flat. "There's a dead man by the ravine." Caleb didn't ask questions. He just nodded. He picked up his rifle. He checked the chamber. "We'll go straight to the lot," he said. "No more splitting. No more talking unless we have to." We moved. We took the quickest line that still had cover. We cut across a slope where the snow had drifted. It came up to mid-shin. Every step was a fight. I wanted to run. Running would have been louder. It would have made us fall. We walked fast. The trees looked the same. I had walked this way 100 times. I didn't know where I was half the time. The woods do that when you are scared. They flatten into a pattern. Every tree is a match for another tree. You find yourself looking for a rock with a shape you know, or a stump with a rot hole, or a place where the old fence wire runs through the undergrowth. I didn't see any of those things. I saw white, gray, black. I saw my own breath. We heard them again. Footsteps. They were not trying to be quiet. They wanted us to hear. Or they didn't care. Or they didn't know any other way to walk in here. It sounded like 2. Maybe 3. They stopped when we stopped. They moved when we moved. Rick looked at me. His grin was gone. His mouth had gone hard again. His eyes were wet with cold. We didn't speak. We reached the shallow saddle that the locals call the spine. It runs along the ridge between the ravine and the creek. If you stay on it, you get to the logging road that leads straight to the lot. If you drop off it too soon, you end up in thickets and deadfall that take time. Time felt like the only thing we couldn't afford. We stepped onto the spine, one and then the other, careful on the ice slick that forms there where the wind scours the snow away. The wind came up hard. It blew straight through my coat. I wanted to hunch, but I forced my shoulders back so I could breathe. Halfway along, where the spine narrows, we found something I will never stop seeing. There was a tree there struck by lightning years ago. It had split and blackened. The stump still stood, jagged and glossy as if the burn had never cooled. 2 marks were cut into it. Fresh. Deep gouges made with a knife or a chisel. 2 vertical slashes side by side. There was sap dried around them like yellow tears. Below the marks, pressed into the snow, was a shape. It looked like a handprint until you noticed it had too long a middle finger. The index and ring were short. The thumb sat too close. It was probably a smear. I know it was probably a smear. But it looked like a hand. "Keep moving," Caleb said. His voice was flat. Not panicked. Just a fact. We kept moving. We hit the logging road. It was covered in snow and crossed with deer tracks, but it was easier than the trees. It felt like stepping into an empty room after being in a closet. I wanted to run again. Caleb shook his head. He didn't even look at me. He just gave that small shake that meant if I ran I'd fall, and if I fell I'd break something, and then I'd be set down like bait without meaning to. We walked the road. The lot was half a mile. Less. The voices followed. Once I heard a laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when they don't know what to do with the feeling in their chest, so they spit it out as sound. It slid over the ice and into my ears and stayed there. The lot was empty when we got there. Our truck sat under a thin crust of snow. The windshield was clear because we had parked late. The hood was cold. We got in. Caleb drove because his hands were steady. Rick took the back seat and stared out the window. I sat in the front and watched the mirror. The road out is rutted and the tires bounced. Snow flew behind us in a white fan. We didn't talk until we hit the county road. Even then we didn't say much. Caleb said, "We call it in." Rick said, "We shower." I said, "We burn the clothes." We did two of those things. We called it in. We showered. We didn't burn the clothes. I wish we had. The sheriff knows us. Small town. He came himself with 2 deputies. We told him what we saw. We told him how many men. We told him where. He asked if we touched the body. I said no. He asked if we saw faces. I said no. Rick said he saw a scar. The sheriff wrote that down. He said he'd take a look and he'd let us know. He said we did right by not trying to be heroes. He said the woods were dangerous in winter. He said a lot of things that made sense and sat wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch so I could look out the front window at the road. Headlights passed twice. Both were neighbors. I knew their trucks and the way they drove. The third set of lights didn't pass. They slowed. They paused. The engine idled low. Then it moved on. It could have been anything. It could have been a lost delivery. It could have been someone checking an address. It could have been nothing. It felt like breathing on glass. In the morning, we met at the diner. That's what you do when you don't know what else to do. We sat in the back corner where the clock's battery is dead and the hands point to 2 times that never come. The waitress, June, poured coffee and asked if we wanted the special. We said sure. It came with pancakes and eggs and a sausage patty that looked pale around the edges. None of us ate much. The sheriff came in while we were there. He saw us. He walked over. He took off his hat and held it in both hands like a man at a funeral. His face was tight around the mouth. "You were right," he said. "There's a body. Male. No ID. We found drag marks. Boot prints. 2 sets. Maybe 3. We're sweeping. I need you boys to come in and go over a map," he said. We went. We traced the line we had walked. We pointed at the place with the lightning stump. The sheriff made a note of that too. He didn't ask about the marks carved in the wood. I didn't tell him. I didn't know why I didn't tell him. It felt like if I said it out loud it would follow the word back to my mouth. That night I dreamed I was standing at the ravine and the body turned over. It didn't have a face. It had bark where skin should be, and under the bark something moved, slow, like it was breathing. When I woke, the room was cold. The heat had shut off. I got up to check the thermostat and saw marks on the inside of my front door. 2 vertical scratches side by side. Shallow, almost nothing. It could have been me with my keys. It could have been the time I moved the couch and scraped the wood without noticing. It could have been anything. But it looked like the marks in the stump. I didn't tell the others about the door. I didn't want to say the words. We met again the second night because we were pretending that life goes on the same after you see what we saw. We met in Caleb's garage. The light there is yellow and makes everything look like a photograph from the 70s. Caleb had his tools lined up the way his father had taught him. He said order in the shop makes order in your head. It worked until it didn't. I think they were waiting, Rick said. He stood with his hands in his pockets and rocked on his heels. He looked like a kid at a bus stop except his eyes were wrong. Not just for night. For us. Or for somebody. How would they know we were there? Caleb asked. They didn't, I said. They were doing their thing. We were the mistake. Rick shook his head. They walked like they knew the whistle. They walked like they wanted us to hear, he said. I told them about the laugh on the road. I told them about the headlights that paused. Caleb said it could be nothing. He said you hear things in fear. He said we were tired. He said we were being watched by the part of our brains that hates not knowing. He was trying to calm us, and I was grateful, but his voice had a line in it that meant he felt it too. It started small. Calls at odd hours. No one on the other end. Click. Silence. The kind of silence that is not empty. The kind that leans. Footsteps on the porch that no one heard but me. Maybe they were my own when I got the mail and forgot. Maybe they were nothing. Maybe. A note under my windshield wiper that was blank. Just a folded paper with no ink. I told myself it was a flyer that had gotten wet and the words had run. I didn't keep it to check. The sheriff put a car by the entrance to Hollow Creek. A deputy sat there in the cold and drank coffee and watched the road. People in town talked. You can't keep something like that quiet. There were theories. There were lies. There were jokes that weren't jokes. 2 days after, the paper ran a small box with "Body Found, Investigation Ongoing," and a picture of the ravine from last spring when the water runs high and looks pretty. It made me angry. It made me feel pretend. I tried to go to work. I work at the mill. It isn't much. It is loud and steady. It fills time. The machines were comforting for a while because they turned my head into a box with only one sound in it. After a few hours, it wasn't comforting. I kept thinking I heard the laugh under the noise. I kept seeing the handprint in the snow that probably wasn't a handprint. I kept seeing the marks cut into the wood. 2 slashes. It was nothing. It was just a thing I saw. It grew teeth when I looked away. 3 nights after, Rick didn't answer texts. He always answered. Even if he was being an ass, he sent a skull emoji or something dumb. He didn't this time. We tried again. Nothing. Caleb drove to his place and knocked. No answer. He called me from the car. His truck is in the driveway, he said. I could hear his breath on the phone, tight and quick, like he had run up the stairs. Break the door, I said. He didn't. He went around back and found the slider unlocked. He stepped into the kitchen. He said later that the smell hit him first. Not blood. Bleach. Too clean. The kind of clean you do on a Friday when you think someone is coming over, not on a Tuesday when you work late. He called out. No answer. He walked down the hall. The bedroom door was closed. The heater kicked on and made a click. He put his hand on the knob and pushed. The room was empty. The bed was made. That was the part that made Caleb swear out loud. Rick never made a bed. On the pillow, there was a hat. Not his. Dark. With a reflective stripe along the rim. I'm calling the sheriff, Caleb said to me on the phone. His voice was hoarse. Get over here. By the time I got there, the sheriff was on scene. He didn't shout at us for crossing the tape. He didn't put up tape. He stood in the doorway and looked at the hat like it was a snake he couldn't see the head of. He asked me when I had last seen Rick. I told him. He asked if there was anything missing. I said I didn't know. He asked Caleb about the slider. He nodded when he heard it was unlocked, like yes, that is what you do when you want to walk in and walk out without leaving a mark. He sent deputies to look around the yard. They found tracks that had been tracked over by more tracks. It was a mess. It had snowed the night before. The snow had melted in the sun where it hit the dirt. It had refrozen. The prints looked soft and hard at the same time. It was like someone had pressed shapes into clay and then someone else had smudged the edges. I stared at them until I went dizzy. They did not make sense. We didn't find Rick that night. We didn't find him the next day. The sheriff put out a notice. He said the word, foul play. He said it careful, like if he said it too loud it would break. I went home. I took my clothes off and put them in a trash bag. I meant to burn them. I put the bag on the back porch. I went inside to get matches. When I came back, the bag was gone. The porch door was closed. The snow beyond the steps was smooth. I told myself the wind had lifted the bag and rolled it into the yard. I told myself a stray dog had grabbed it. I told myself a lot of things that were not possible. I didn't go look for the bag. I went inside and locked the door and pushed the couch in front of it because locks didn't feel like anything anymore. Someone knocked around midnight. 3 hard knocks. I held my breath and did not move. I waited. The knock came again. 3. Then nothing. I stood there for an hour, I think. I watched the window. I saw my reflection. It looked like someone I didn't know. In the morning, there were 2 marks on the porch rail. Shallow cuts, side by side. I touched them. The wood splintered under my finger and a needle went in. I pulled it out and my fingertip bled. The blood looked bright in the cold. For a second I stared because it looked alive in a way nothing else did. Then I sucked the finger and tasted metal and old wood and something else I won't try to name. Caleb called. He hadn't slept either. He said the sheriff wanted us to come in again. He said they had found tracks near the lot at Hollow Creek. He said the deputy at the entrance had fallen asleep and woken to find a paper on his windshield wiper, blank. No fingerprints. No nothing. My stomach turned. I didn't tell Caleb about the blank note on my truck. I should have. We went. The sheriff had maps spread out. He had photos that had been printed too dark on a bad printer. The ravine. The stump. The road. He circled places with a pen and tapped the circle with a finger. He asked us the same questions again and again. He wasn't being a jerk. He was trying to shake something loose. He asked about enemies. He asked about people we had crossed. He asked about men with scars. We shook our heads and said no, and I don't think so. He told us they had found a second site. Not a body. A hole started and half filled. Drag marks. He said he thought the men had been interrupted before. He said we might not be the first to stumble into this. He said a lot of things that sounded like hope and felt like nothing. We left around dusk. The sky was the color of a bruise. The air smelled like someone had put out a match. Caleb and I stood by our trucks and didn't want to say goodbye because that meant we were alone again. He said, "Come stay at my place." I said, "You come stay at mine." We didn't. We went to our own houses because that's what people do even when it's the wrong thing. I woke at 3 in the morning to the creak of a floorboard in the hallway. My house is old. It creaks. If you live in an old house you learn your creaks. This wasn't mine. This one was a new note in a song I had known since I was a kid. I lay still. The creak came again, closer. Someone was walking slow, heel to toe, the way you move when you don't want to be heard. The hallway light was off. I saw nothing under the gap of the door. I held the rifle I keep by the bed and felt the weight of it like a hand. "Caleb," I said, because saying his name was easier than saying nothing. The steps stopped. A whisper came through the door. It was not a voice I knew. It was not a whisper the way people whisper when they mean to tell you something private. It was a whisper like someone practicing the shape of my name with their mouth. It said my name wrong and almost right. It stretched it. It made it thin. I didn't open the door. I didn't shout. I cocked the rifle and the sound of the metal was so loud it shook my ribs. The whisper stopped. The steps moved away, slow. The front door opened. Cold came in. The door shut. I lay there until the light seeped into the edges of the window shade. I called Caleb at 6. He picked up on the first ring and said, "They were in my barn." He said it like he was telling me the time. He said he had found boot prints in the dust by the workbench. He said 2 cuts had been made on the edge of the bench, shallow, side by side. He said the vise had been turned all the way tight as if it held something that had slipped free. We went to the sheriff again. He listened. He didn't tell us we were being crazy. He sent a car to sit outside my house and a car to sit outside Caleb's. They did. The deputies were good men who drank coffee and tried to look like they weren't freezing. They didn't see anything. Nothing happened all day. Nothing happened the next night. That kind of nothing makes you feel like the floor of your life is soft. The 5th day after the woods, Rick came back. Not to our doors. Not to the sheriff's. He came back to the diner. June called me. Her voice shook. "You should get down here," she said. "He's here. He's not right." I drove too fast. I ran the light at the corner because there was no one there to hit and because I couldn't sit still in the pause. I pulled into the lot crooked. I left the truck door open and went in. Rick sat in the back where we like to sit. He had no coat. His shirt was buttoned wrong. His hair was wet. He looked like he had walked out of water. He stared at the table. He didn't look up when I said his name. June stood a few feet away and wrung her hands in a towel she hadn't realized she still held. "Rick," I said again, softer. I sat down across from him. His lips were white. He had a cut on his cheek, shallow, neat, straight. It looked made. It looked like something done, not something that happened. He blinked slow and finally looked at me. His eyes were wrong. They were the right color but they were set too far back, like he was standing somewhere inside them looking out across a long room. "Where were you?" I asked. He opened his mouth. His tongue was gray. His voice came out thin and dry. "In the woods," he said. He swallowed. June moved like she would bring water and then stopped because she didn't want to be close. "I went to the stump," he said. "They were there. They took me under." "Under what?" I asked. My voice shook. I put my hands flat on the table to stop them moving. He lifted his hand. There were marks on his palm. 2 parallel cuts. He hadn't wrapped them. They had crusted and reopened. They made a sign when he held his hand up like that. It made my stomach go cold. "Under," he said again, as if the word was a place. Under the ground but not. Caleb came in then. He saw Rick and stopped like he had walked into a wall. He walked over slow. He sat beside me. He didn't speak. "They took me where the creek sounds like metal," Rick said. They laughed. They told me to listen because I wasn't hearing the right thing. They said if I learned the right whistle I could go home. He looked at me. He smiled then, a small strange smile that didn't touch his eyes. "I learned it," he said. "Who took you?" I asked. "The men from the ravine." My throat hurt. Rick blinked, slow, like a lizard. "Men," he said, like he was trying the word on his tongue. "Under," he said again, softer. He leaned forward and breathed in like he was smelling me. He closed his eyes and nodded. The sheriff came. He stood at the end of the table and looked at our friend with a face that said he had seen worse and never seen this. He asked Rick questions I would have asked if my head had been right. Rick answered some and didn't answer others. He didn't tell us where he had been, exactly. He didn't tell us how he had gotten loose. He didn't tell us what the marks in his hand meant. He did say one true thing. He said, clear and even, don't go back. If you go back, you don't come home the same. They took him to the clinic. They wanted to keep him for observation. He nodded and let them. He lay in a bed in a room that smelled like latex and lemon. He stared at the ceiling and hummed under his breath. The tune was almost our whistle and nodded. It had a wrong beat. It made my skin crawl. I had to leave the room. I stood in the hall and pressed my forehead to the cool paint until I felt like I could breathe. That night the clinic called. Rick was gone. He had walked out in his bare feet sometime after 3. The camera caught him coming down the hall. His eyes were open and he was smiling. He turned left where the exit is right. He walked into a storeroom and didn't come out. When they went in at 6, the door was locked from the inside. The room was empty. The window was bolted. The vent cover was still screwed on. There were 2 marks on the inside of the door, side by side, cut shallow in the wood. I didn't sleep. I don't think Caleb did either. At dawn I drove to Hollow Creek without calling him. I don't know why. I told myself I was going to stand at the entrance and say out loud that I was done. I told myself I was going to spit in the snow and walk away and that would mean something. It didn't. When I got there, the deputy's car was gone. Maybe he was up the road getting coffee. Maybe he was never there. The chain across the entrance had been cut. It lay in the snow like a snake. I walked in. I told myself I would not go far. I told myself I would only go to the first bend where the old fence post sits. I told myself I would not go to the ravine. Every step took me deeper. The trees took me the way they take you when they want you. I reached the stump with the lightning burn without meaning to. The marks were there. 2 clean cuts, deeper than before. Sap had run and frozen. My breath smoked and curled. The air smelled like bleach for a second and then like metal. I felt something press on my chest, not from the front but from the back, like the woods had a hand between my shoulder blades and was urging me to look down. I looked. There was a hole by the stump. Not a grave. Not a trap. Just a hole that was very dark. The snow around it had been brushed aside in neat arcs. The edges looked clean, like someone had cut the ground with a blade. From the hole came a sound. It was the sound water makes when it moves under ice, and also the sound a voice makes in your ear when it means to be kind but isn't. My feet moved without me. I stepped closer. I knew I shouldn't. I knew if I looked long enough I would see eyes. I looked anyway. I saw nothing. That was worse. I saw a shape like the suggestion of a ladder that wasn't there. I saw a glimmer like wet wood. I heard the whistle. Not ours. The right one, the wrong one, the one that comes from under. I stepped back. My heel hit something and I almost fell. A hand caught my arm. Human. Strong. I jerked and turned. Caleb stood there, pale, lips blue from the cold. He had sweat on his forehead that had frozen into a dusting of crystals. "What the hell are you doing?" he said. "I don't know," I said. It was the truth. He didn't let go of my arm. "We're leaving," he said. He pulled me away. We moved fast. The woods closed behind us as if we had pushed through a curtain that fell back into place. The hole was gone when I looked back. The stump was just a stump. The 2 cuts in the wood were sunlit and harmless. Back at the lot, Caleb put both hands on my shoulders and looked at me like a man trying not to cry. "You can't go alone," he said. "Not now. Not ever." I wasn't, I said, but I had been. We went to the sheriff and told him about the chain. He went red in the face. He called for more deputies. He put up a real barrier this time, thick, bright, with a padlock as big as a fist. He said there would be patrols. He said we did not go back. He said the words with authority and kindness and I wanted to believe him. I said yes. I meant it. I still mean it. I won't go. Something came home with us anyway. I don't know what else to call it. It wasn't a ghost or a monster like in stories. It was a shape of a habit. It was a shadow where there hadn't been a shadow. It was a whistle that didn't belong to any wind. It touched the edges of life in a way you could almost ignore until you looked and then you couldn't. I would find small things out of place. Keys moved 2 inches to the left. A photo on the fridge turned crooked when no one had brushed it. 2 short scratches appeared inside the pantry door where I never stored anything heavy enough to do that. I fixed each small thing because fixing them felt like an act against whatever it was. I set the keys in a bowl and marked the bowl's position with a pencil line. I taped the photo and drew a box around it. I sanded the scratches and painted the wood and then put a piece of tape over that too. I made my house into a grid of checked squares. Nothing stayed put. Caleb said he was doing the same. He laughed when he told me, but it wasn't a joke. He said he had put flour on the floor of the barn to catch prints. He said he had put mirrors facing the doors so he could see someone come in behind him. He said he had stacked cans by the window so they would fall if the sash lifted. He said every morning the cans were still stacked and yet when he looked at them he could tell they had been moved. We stopped going to the diner. We stopped going to the bar. People were talking and I didn't want to hear it. People have stories and they want to share. I didn't want their versions in my head. I had enough of my own. The sheriff called once more, 2 weeks after, to tell me they had identified the body in the ravine. A man from 2 counties over. Missing a month. He had a record. He had hurt people. He had gotten out on a mistake in paperwork. He said that as if it would make me feel okay. It didn't. It made something worse. It made the clean line between good and bad blur in a way I didn't want blurred. If someone had done this to him because of what he had done, where did that leave us as the ones who saw? Where did that leave Rick who had gone under and come back and then gone again? A week after that, I found a deer's skull on my porch. Clean. White. No smell. 2 shallow cuts on the top, side by side. I picked it up with gloves and put it in a trash bag and drove it to the dump. On the way back, the same truck that had paused outside my house that first night fell in behind me. It followed for 5 miles. It turned when I turned. When I pulled into the lot of the hardware store, it slowed and went on. It had a reflective stripe along the bottom of the back gate. I didn't see the driver. I didn't need to. My hands shook so hard on the wheel I had to put my forehead on it and breathe until the air didn't taste like pennies. This is where you expect a big ending. A standoff in the trees. A hero thing. That isn't what happened. Life pulled at us. We still had to work. We still had to buy groceries. We still had to sleep sometimes. The sheriff moved his car from the entrance after a month because nothing had happened that he could write down. People still went into Hollow Creek because you can't keep people out of the only big patch of trees within an hour unless you put up an army. Hunters went. Couples went at night to be alone. Kids went to prove they weren't scared. No one else found a body. No one else came back wrong. Or if they did, they didn't say. Caleb keeps asking me to go with him to fish the lake because it's open water and not the woods. I say yes, sometimes. We sit in the boat and talk about things that don't matter. We don't talk about marks cut in wood or holes by stumps or the way sound dies. We don't talk about Rick much. When we do, we say his name gently and then stop. Saying it feels like knocking twice on a door that someone will make a third knock on from the other side. We don't want that third knock. I wake to the whistle sometimes. It is always far and near at the same time. It sounds like wind in a bottle and breath at my ear. It makes my chest go tight like my ribs are a cage. It fades when I sit up and turn on the lamp. 2 shallow scratches are on the nightstand now where the base of the lamp sits. I sand them. I paint. They come back. I keep the rifle by the bed. I know it won't help. I keep it anyway. I've been asked why I don't move. I've been asked why I don't leave the town, the county, the state. I thought about it once. I put my clothes in a duffel and put the bag in the truck. I started the engine. I sat there staring at the steering wheel, and in the center, where the logo is, there were 2 tiny scratches side by side that had never been there. I shut off the engine. I went back inside and put the duffel away. Leaving isn't the opposite of going back to Hollow Creek. The opposite is staying away and living anyway. I am trying to do that. If you are listening to this because you want to know where not to hunt, here is what I will tell you. Don't hunt in Hollow Creek. Don't walk where the trees stand so close you can hear them think. Don't follow a trail because you followed it 100 times before and think the woods owe you safe passage. They don't. The woods don't owe you anything. They are honest. They are a door. They can be opened from either side. If you go anyway and you hear a whistle that sounds like yours and isn't, don't answer. If you see marks cut in wood, 2 shallow slashes, don't trace them with your finger the way I did on my door. If you find a hole by a stump that smells like bleach and metal, don't look down into it even if it calls your name. If 2 men walk past you with work boots and one has a scar like a white line on his chin, don't look at their faces. You won't see them anyway. You'll see something else looking out. I still like the quiet. I like it in the early morning when the furnace hasn't kicked on and the house sits and waits. I like it in the minute after the truck engine dies and the ticking heat leans into silence. I liked it in the woods once. Now when I stand on my porch on a clear night and the snow throws back starlight and the air freezes the hair in my nose, the quiet is not a blanket. It's a mouth. I don't hunt in those woods anymore. I keep my rifles clean out of habit and respect. I oil them. I wipe them down. I don't load them unless a sound wakes me and I can't not load them. I don't go to the ravine. I stay out of the trees when the light hits them flat and makes them look like bars. I keep waiting for the sheriff to call and say they found Rick. He doesn't. He calls sometimes for other things. He asks how we're doing. He wants to know if we saw anything new. I tell him about cans on the floor that did not fall and still did. I tell him about marks I paint over. He listens. He says he will keep an eye on the entrance. He says he will call if anything turns up with the man from 2 counties over. He says a lot of useful things. None of them touch the center of it. Caleb brought me a thermos last week. The good kind. He said we should take a drive to the coast and sit where we can see the ocean and pretend that we have always been men who looked at water instead of trees. I said okay. We haven't gone. The thought of driving the long road out of town makes my shoulders bunch up. The thought of not going makes my teeth ache. I hold both those things and walk to the kitchen and make coffee and watch the light come up in squares on the floor. Sometimes I dream that Rick is standing on the edge of my yard where the property line runs into the brush and the snow stops being my snow and starts being the wood snow. He doesn't wave. He stands like a man waiting for a bus that never comes. He looks at my house like he is choosing a window. In the dream I open the door and step onto the porch and put my hands on the rail where the scratches are and I say his name and he looks at me and smiles that small wrong smile and says, "Don't go back," and then turns and walks into the trees. I wake and the house is quiet and I can hear my heart and it sounds like footsteps going away. If you ask what I believe, I will tell you I believe this: we stepped into a thing we didn't understand and it noticed us. That is all. It did not choose us because we were special. We were there. We were wrong enough to stop and look. We were right enough to walk away. We were unlucky enough that it reached after us and found our names. It will keep reaching as long as I remember the sound of it. Forgetting feels like betrayal. Remembering feels like invitation. So I do the small work. I paint. I set keys in a bowl and draw a pencil line around it and check. I check again. I sleep sometimes. I live here. I don't hunt the woods. When the first snow falls each year, it used to pull me outside to listen to how the world changes when the white comes down. Now I watch through glass. The flakes hit the window and melt and leave tiny clear circles that catch the light. The yard softens. The road hushes. Somewhere past town, the trees hold up their black hands and catch the same snow and the same light and whisper to each other in a voice that is not for me. The ravine fills and flattens. The stump with the lightning burn stands and stands. The marks in the wood fill with ice and shine like eyes. The hole opens and closes depending on who looks at it. The men with the scar and the shovel walk where boots always walk, and under them something laughs and breathes and learns the right whistle. I pour coffee into the thermos Caleb gave me and hold it and let the heat move through my fingers. I think about calling him. I think about the boat. The lake where the water is honest because it will kill you if you forget it is water. I think about telling him I had the dream again, and then I don't, because I don't want to say Rick's name out loud. I put the thermos by the door. I don't go out. I stand and watch the light on the floor. The door knocks once. Then twice. Then a third time. I don't move. I wait. The knocks do not come again. After an hour, I walk over and press my ear to the wood. The wood is cold. Through it comes a sound like wind and like breath and like the smallest part of a laugh. I put my palm flat. The grain is smooth where I have sanded and painted and sanded and painted. Under my hand are 2 shallow cuts. I close my eyes. I don't open the door. I take my hand away. The quiet fills the house and stays there, honest, patient, waiting for me to choose which way I will listen. I choose the quiet. I stand very still. I let it wrap around me like the old blanket I used to love and now only fear. I tell myself this is enough. I tell myself I am done. I say it over and over until I almost believe it.